Welcome to CPAC Now, America UnCanceled. We're doing a special edition on this tragic war in Israel. And with me, I have a very special guest, Julie Strauss Levin, a dear friend of CPAC, someone who's been on our CPAC stage a number of times, addressing so many issues, but this issue obviously very important to you, Julie, and to your family. Thank you for joining me.
You're very welcome. It's a pleasure to be with you on one hand because it's you, Mercy, but it's a real tragedy, and it's with a very, very heavy and in many ways frightened heart that I join all of you today.
Now, you were headed to Israel and to run a race. You do this on occasion. You've done it. Last time was last March, I believe, and obviously you're not going to be able to head over there now. What are you hearing from people on the ground as they have faced this horrific surprise attack by the terrorist Hamas?
So I will tell you this, and there's so much to talk about in a very short amount of time, but this past weekend was not only Shabbat, which is the day of rest in the Jewish faith that starts on Friday night and that goes until Saturday evening, but it was also the celebration of Simchat Torah, which celebrates the full year reading of the Jewish Bible, of the Torah, and then the commencement again for the year, reading this document that has existed in our faith, and it is the basis for the Hebrew and then the Christian Bible for centuries. And it was at that early in the morning, 6 something in the morning on Saturday, the morning of Shabbat, that Hamas infiltrated into southern Israel and started its maiming. And when I say maiming, I literally mean maiming of innocent women, children, elderly men in kibbutzim and other communities in southern Israel, including in a town called Sderot, which I've been to several times. And the residents down there are used to living a life of being infiltrated and having, well, not infiltrated, but as much as having rockets lobbed into southern Israel, to the point where there is an underground playground where children routinely play in. This is their way of life.
Right.
And so this time what happened was Hamas infiltrated through a very they're figuring out the ways it's been happening, one of which was cutting off cameras and so forth, but literally entering into these communities and murdering in cold blood people. I mean, I can give some details. I don't need to give a lot. I'm happy to speak a bit about it, but it's gruesome to the point of, people have compared it to ISIS, and I think that's a very, very accurate.
Yeah, and in Israel, they're saying that this is their their version of also 9/11. Just in addition to the fact that you've seen these gruesome images, and I got to tell you, when you hear these heart-wrenching stories of babies being killed, babies being beheaded, taking elderly from their homes, holding a number of these individuals hostages, including Americans. We know that there's over 22 Americans that have been killed or at this point. I mean, it's just something, I think, that caught the world and caught Israel by surprise. And yet you're seeing the Israeli Defense Forces get organized, move fast, and take action to destroy Hamas.
Yeah, everything you're saying is 100% accurate. They are moving with, to say speed and alacrity is an understatement. I can tell you that my nephew is on his way to Israel right now. He was a soldier in the IDF and is going back, not because he was called up, but because he's going to protect our people.
Yeah.
And as you know, I have a daughter who is a doctor. She's a resident at Johns Hopkins, and she's already spoken to Hopkins about going over in a volunteer capacity. Of course, as her mom, I have mixed feelings about it, but I understand.
Yeah,
I do understand.
The bravery that's needed right now It's so important in essence in understanding. Yeah. Walk us through the psychology of these Hamas terrorists. I mean, they're barbarians, they're savages, they hate us. They hate Western civilization. It goes even beyond the Jewish people. It's about, Christians as well. What's their psychology? What's their goal?
So I'm glad you asked that question, because that's a very, very accurate statement. For those who think this is just a Jewish problem, which would be bad enough as somebody of the Jewish faith, this is a Western civilization problem. These are fanatics who want to eradicate anybody who is not a radical Muslim and does not believe in Islam. They do not believe there's a place in the world for anyone to think other than their crazy psychology, right? So yes, Israel is the starting point. And, a very brief history, which I'm happy to go into, I don't need to, of Gaza and the Gaza Strip and what is it, and because a lot of people don't understand.
Please explain it. This is
okay,
important.
So very, very briefly, as you and I well know, and you've been to Israel before, and it certainly touches your heart of somebody of the Catholic faith. This small strip of land has been the ancestral homeland of the Jewish people for thousands of years. We all know the story of Exodus, yes. And it's a story that has over the centuries been one where the Jews were given the land by God. They were then kicked out. The cycle of the diaspora, the Jews forced out. We all know, I'm going through this super quickly, and then the Holocaust happened, and then the Jews were able to return to their ancestral homeland. It's an important point, because what a lot of the fanatics like to say is that the Jews were given this land in 1948 because of the Holocaust, and that these Jews are, quote, occupiers, right, and land does not belong to them. And that's not an accurate statement at all. It is their ancestral homeland, to which there are ties. I wear around my neck a necklace that is a replica of the priestly blessing that was found written more than 2,500 years ago, and was found in recent history that is in Hebrew, and that contains the psalm written by King David, that starts off with, "May God bless you and keep you." So the Jewish ties to the ancestral homeland are seen every day in the excavations. So what happened was, ever since 1948, when the new Israel was recreated, if you will, on that day, 5 Arab countries decided, well, we're not going to accept that UN vote and partition, and there had been wars for survival ever since. This being the most recent, this past Saturday, and in 2005, in an attempt, and over the years, there's been this chatter of, should Israel give some land, right, to this group called the Palestinians, which is not truly a group of people other than a name given to them by an individual by the name of Yasser Arafat, who was a militant and whose uncle actually was the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, and who worked with and flew to Europe to combine, if you will, with combined forces, if you will, with Hitler. Again, many people don't know that was Yasser Arafat's uncle who said, "What do you want us to do here in the Middle East? We'll eradicate the Jews from here. You do your job there." Obviously, we know what happened in World War II, but Yasser Arafat emerged and decided that he would try to keep going this concept of getting rid of the Jews in their historic homeland, and came up with the name Palestinians. There's no such thing as Palestinians, right, other than this great label he gave them, in the world got sucked into this whole, the poor Palestinians. They were driven from their land by the Jews, when in fact they were rejected by other Arab countries. So yeah.
No, sorry. I want to add something there. So then on top of that, let's say a Palestinian kills, a Jewish person, then they basically then are viewed as martyrs in their own, you know what I mean? And they die. Let's say they're, like a suicide bomber. They are praised and celebrated, right?
Well,
in
that's
the Palestinian
exactly
world
right.
And
I think what you're referring to is something called pay to slay, which
yes.
is a program that was set up by the Palestinian Authority. So what happened was there was this thought in 2005 that if we only give some land to this group of people that are calling themselves the Palestinians, that we, Israel, will be able to have peace in exchange for giving them this area. At the time, this was a very, very thriving community living on the Mediterranean. Jews were living in Gaza. A vote happened. I was actually in Israel at the time, and Israel was very, very split. There were people who said, don't be silly. There will never be land for peace. If we give them this, they will kill us. There were others who said we must try. So they tried. That was 2005. There was a vote in 2006 where this Hamas faction won the governance, if you will, of Gaza because the Palestinians moved in.
Right.
Jews removed from this beautiful area. Their homes were razed, and it turned from a beautiful, fertile area to a prison, if you will, where Hamas took over. They've suppressed their own people, and they've used it as a launching pad, as you know, and you've seen over the years, to go after Israel. Nevertheless, Israel has provided free electricity, again, in the hopes of this concept of land for peace. So the PA, the Palestinian Authority, resides in what is truly Judea and Samaria. Mm-hmm. The media and others call it the West Bank, which is just a term West Bank of what? Of Jordan. It was, again, a whole media and Yasser Arafat creation. So the PA has what is known as pay to slay. If you go and you kill an Israeli or an American, anybody who's not of their ilk, the payment that is paid either to the terrorist or the family to the terrorist, should the terrorist die in the act of terrorism, is basically a lifetime pension for committing acts of terror. So this psyche has existed for years.
Talking about the psyche, I'm also seeing a huge anti-Semitic propaganda machine that's infiltrating the United States. I mean, we just saw how Black Lives Matter puts out this statement and standing with the Palestinian people, doesn't even condemn Hamas. You've got the Squad in Congress also always been so critical of Israel, calling it an apartheid. It's something that has really even entered our universities, as Harvard, over 30 student organizations, basically condemning Israel, blaming Israel for the violence, nothing against Hamas and this terrorist activities, killing thousands of innocent people. Why is that happening here in America? What's the root of it?
I think the cause is from multiple fronts, not the least of which is academia. I mean, we know the psyche of academia against our own American exceptionalism, right? It's a crazy thing where we're sending our kids to college and they're being taught, and we're paying a lot of money for these young people to hate America. It's the same concept against Israel. You've got these groups, and one of the you're referring to is not just Black Lives Matter. You're 100% correct, which is an anti-Semitic, anti-American Marxist group. Mm-hmm. But there's other groups such as Students for Justice in Palestine, right, which has roots, and we're doing a lot of research on it right now, because we see that there's funding. We believe that there's some funding. There's certainly ties with groups like Hamas. And so what they're doing is they're going on college campuses and they're teaching this hate, and they're teaching this acceptance, and the why behind the what. We approach this as freedom lovers of freedom and liberty and the American exceptionalism. So it's hard to wrap our heads around, like, where does this come from? Sure. This comes from hatred of Western civilization. Start of story, end of story. And you refer to, and you touched on the squad. The Democrat Party today is a party that is virulently not just anti-American, but anti-Semitic.
Yes.
And it's highly, highly dangerous when you have members of Congress who literally empathize, if you will, with what's going on in Israel today and will not disavow it. And you have an administration that, in my mind, has not only blood on its hands, but is drenched with the blood of innocent Israelis today for what the policies are of this administration.
You brought up the Biden administration. It's been interesting to watch that just actually it was the anniversary of 9/11 where $6 billion were handed over to Iran. They keep, I don't understand why they keep trying to appease, try to negotiate with a country that sponsors terrorism across the globe and gives millions of dollars to Hamas, gives millions of dollars to Hezbollah, and Iran just comes out, as if they're not even involved. In fact, the White House, it looks like they don't even really want to bring up Iran. Biden doesn't even want to answer basic questions. What role is Iran playing in this conflict?
I think Iran is behind it. Iran has said they're behind it. Kirby the other day was actually shockingly asked a question about the role of Iran, and he stood behind the podium and he said, Iran has no place. The money that we're giving to Iran is only going for humanitarian aid to the Iranian people. Now, I don't know what's more insulting. The fact that he would dare stand up there and think that the American people are so stupid that we don't know that money's fungible. The money is not going to the Iranian people. The money is going to the Iranian regime that wants to kill Americans and Israelis. Look, when someone says they want to kill you, you take them seriously. On Sunday, in the parliament in Iran, they were chanting, they were shouting, death to America, death to Israel. Israel's the little Satan. We're the big Satan.
Yes.
Make no mistake about it. When the IDF is over there spilling their blood, they're doing it for them, but they're also the first line of defense for the American people. Iran is 100% behind this, with, as you said, funding Hezbollah, Hamas. Both those groups have said it. And the Biden administration is obsessed with appeasing this regime. And it started with Obama.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, because you brought up, in the fact with Hamas, there's a founding member, a former leader of Hamas, Khalid Mashal. Basically, this is a Reuters story calling for a day of sacrifice, heroism, and dedication to jihad, basically saying we need a general mobilization this Friday, October 13th, obviously causing a lot of concern in the major cities across the globe and here in the United States. Yet I don't hear the Biden administration even addressing this issue so far. Should Americans take this, be vigilant? Should they take this seriously? I mean, I got to tell you, we both went through 9/11. I mean, I was at the White House during 9/11, so this feels very similar to those feelings of these potential terrorist attacks happening not only in Israel, but even in the United States.
Look, I think it's very naive not to be vigilant. I think when you have a situation where we have an extremely porous, the door is wide open at our southern border. And I could tick off to you the statistics of the numbers of individuals from Middle East countries who were encountered. I mean, I can just, yes. Afghanistan, 6,300, Egypt, 3,100, Iran, almost 660, Syria, Uzbekistan, Turkey. The number goes on and on. Those are the individuals who were encountered. That does not include the gotaways that have come across this southern border. On Sunday, we saw rallies in New York City, in LA. I believe there were ones in Chicago and elsewhere celebrating Hamas, cheering them on. You mentioned what's going on university campuses. Do I think that there are terror cells, that there are groups waiting to rise up? You bet.
Yeah.
This must be taken so seriously. And what's really frightening is we have an administration that is ignoring it. You have a president who had a barbecue on Sunday. The music was so loud that reporters could hear it. This is the day after the single greatest death toll of Jews in one day since the Holocaust. That was a Saturday. And the next day, this guy in the White House has a barbecue. So as unserious as he is, the American people must take it seriously. Because as we started our whole conversation, this isn't just about the Jews. This is about our entire civilization.
Yes, it is a global war on Western civilization. Let me ask you this last question here. When it comes to what would you recommend the Biden administration do immediately? And to that, what should the Republicans in Congress also be pushing now as we've entered into what I think is just a very precarious and just dangerous moment in our history?
So there's a lot of things that can be done. Number one, the Biden administration needs to give Israel whatever Israel is asking for in terms of financial aid, in terms of military aid. One thing that people need to understand is that Israel is not and will not be asking for troops on the ground. They want to fight their own battles for a whole number of reasons. So that shouldn't be a concern of people. But when Israel says we need funds for Iron Dome, or we need artillery, or we need something for David Sling, give it to them so they can fight their battle and our battle. Because again, that's what it is. Number one. Number two, Iran, we've got to pull back. We've got to claw back all that funding, and we've got to be serious about imposing sanctions. When Trump was president, when President Trump was in office, Iran was on its knees.
Yes.
And that's what we need to dial back. And we need to treat the enemy like it deserves to be treated, which is decapitated. And so Biden needs to look back at that playbook and follow it. That's number two. Number three, we need the Biden administration to educate the media. The media is our worst enemy. Because they are already, you mentioned Black Lives Matter, I mentioned Students for Justice in Palestine. They are, if you look at the verbiage that those two groups are using, the media is already using it. As in one sentence, we're talking about babies being decapitated, and then in the next sentence, they're talking about the poor Gazans. Never during World War II did we talk about the number of Germans we killed or the number of Japanese we killed in an empathetic way. They're already talking about the poor Gazans killed. No. These are terrorists. They need to be eradicated. And if the media doesn't get a good smacking around by the Biden administration to say, no, you're going to come in line and you're going to say the accurate, not propaganda, but factual information for the American people, that's, to me, a huge part of it, because this is going to be a war. This is a war. Netanyahu said this is a war. This is not a war that happens in 2 days. This is a war that may take months to slaughter and annihilate the enemy. And that's what has to happen. And we need the hearts and minds and support of the American people to do that.
Any last words, any message of hope, anywhere Americans can help the people of Israel?
I am happy to get to you a list of charities. If you,
we will put them up on our screen. We'll definitely do that. That would be great.
Because there's a lot of need there. I really, really appreciate that ask. I think charity is crucial. I think people need to speak up and not be afraid. I will wear my Star of David. I know you will wear your cross.
My Jerusalem cross, yes.
Jerusalem cross.
Yes.
people cannot be afraid. I
Julie,
refuse to be afraid.
Can you share your story? You ran the marathon this past week, and you told me a number of the few number of people that came up to you because you were wearing the T-shirt.
So yes, very quickly. Thank you for reminding me about that. So I'm a crazy runner, as you know. You mentioned I was in Jerusalem running in March and was going to be there. There's a race on Friday, or not any longer, obviously. So I decided I'm going to be running a whole bunch of races in the next several weeks, wearing a sign on my back saying "We stand with Israel." So my daughter and I ran the Army 10-miler on Saturday. We put signs on our back that says "We stand in support of Israel." We were around thousands of people from the time we got there to the time we left afterward. And it was so sad and frightening, honestly, that out of all those people, there were maybe 6 who either during the race or afterwards gave us a thumbs up, said, "Thank you, we stand with Israel too." Mercy, 6 people out of thousands. So that either tells me that too many people don't even know, or too many people don't care, or a combination. And I think it's, the latter, that they don't know, they don't care, and or don't know, doesn't matter. It should have been, we should have constantly had people, cheer us on with that sign.
Well, I told my girls that we're putting our sign up that says "I stand with Israel." We all need to pray for Israel.
Yes.
We're going to be praying for your nephew and for your daughter as they move forward in this next stage. It's a very difficult time, and I really feel like I feel like we have to be on the mountaintop yelling, saying, "Wake up, because it's all going to be gone. It's everything we fought for, everything we built. It's all going to be gone, because they have to understand that there is an enemy and there is evil and there are people trying to destroy us, and we have to stand strong to make sure that this doesn't happen, especially when we're seeing such weak leadership here in the U.S. So, Julie, I want to thank you. Any last thoughts?
One last thought, and I'm happy to come on whenever you'd like. But one last thought is, I recall as I was growing up and I studied the Holocaust, I'm sort of obsessed with even continuing education about it. And one thought that I had, that I know many had, which is, how could this have happened? This was only in the 1940s. Germany was an enlightened society. I don't have that question anymore. Think about that.
Yeah.
We now see how people can just watch it happening.
Watch it happening and not do a thing and not be angry and not, you're right. You're so right. It's when you stay silent, you keep giving in, and that's when you can really lose a country and the great people in the country. Julie Strauss, Levin, thank you so much for being with us. We're lots of blessings to you and your family, and thank you for being such a strong and brave warrior.
Thank you so much, and same to you. Same to you. Thank you for all you do.
Well, thank you all for watching, and remember, you can always watch our show not only on cpac.org, but on any podcast that you listen to, and we are looking forward to continuing giving you updates on this important issue, on this horrific war that's happening in Israel, but we stand together with our brothers and sisters in Israel. God bless.